This is Friday, the 11th day of January, 2013, and we are at the Supreme Court.
The illusion of the Supreme Court right here, as you notice, it's actually a tarp, a picture of the Supreme Court on the tarp, so I think that's very fitting right there. It's appropriate.
Yes. So there's no justice, there's no need for a Supreme Court. So you're part of a group?
Yes, I'm part of Witness Against Torture. We're here on the 11th anniversary of Guantanamo. And up front here, we're starting our walk, our procession from the Supreme Court to the White House. And in front of the Supreme Court now, we have 55 names of the official names that have, of the 87 that have been released in Guantanamo Bay. There are 87. We have all of the names of the 166 that are still in there, but officially now the names are out and the photos up here. So we're going to go speak to some civilians, people, and also some officials too about closing Guantanamo and bringing some justice, and maybe we can bring down this facade that's up here.
We're here at the White House, the house of the president, where these reprehensible policies began, cooked up by Bush, Cheney, and lawyer hacks like Addington, and where these policies must end through the fulfillment of the promise of our current president, who, as Andy has said, has shown extreme cowardice in apparently abandoning his own stated convictions. It's a special institution, the United States presidency. The president is the most powerful political leader in the world, not just because of the military he commands, the wealth of this nation, and its projection of power throughout the world. If those were the sole standards, Hitler or Stalin might be considered the most powerful. The president is the most powerful also in part because of the power of the American idea, the idea of democracy, which ultimately is the world's idea, created by different societies in different ways, shaped by their own history and the determinants of their own culture. So powerful, the president is uniquely capable of doing enormous harm and enormous good, and the office has been used historically for both. Indian removal, the perpetuation of slavery, terrible overt and covert wars in Vietnam and Latin America. But it's also from the White House that the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, the institutions of the New Deal were created, and the struggle against fascism and totalitarian communism were led. In the person of President Obama, we've seen the great advancement in part of the fulfillment of the American creed of equality. But for the last 12 years, profoundly, the White House has been the site of the violation by its office holders of their profound oath to the U.S. Constitution and the principles of due process and equality under the law contained within, and the prospect that the United States might in some small way inspire or even lead the world in commitment to bedrock principles of human rights. Two presidents now have sedimented America's identity as a torture nation, defined in part by nearly incomprehensible hypocrisy and delusional commitment to the myth of America's unerring virtue as it continues to commit heinous crimes. Two presidents now have brought shame on their office. Of course, Muslim men in Guantanamo, Bagram, black sites around the world have suffered the worst consequences of that shame. But these presidents have brought a whole nation into complicity with a great crime and caused us to inflict great moral injury against ourselves. It is time, therefore, to heal. Yes, because that moral injury for many of us, abstract and at the same time very real, grows intolerable, but mostly because of the physical and psychological damage to the hapless victims of the misbegotten and misnamed War on Terror remains completely unacceptable. Which is to say that to heal requires that we change, not that we forgive ourselves and forget, bury the truth with obfuscation, lies, secrecy courts, flim-flam immunity, movies that propagandize. Specifically, we must close Guantanamo and the military commissions and do all those things that people have spoken about so eloquently today. More profoundly, we must make this second inauguration of Obama the inauguration of justice in a real and honest way. We must free the innocent, make the law a means of justice once again, heal our own sickness, and redeem our times. Thank you.
So this is the 6th or 7th year we've had this march in black hoods and orange jumpsuits, which is only a small taste of what the men in Guantanamo, and the ones especially still there, must feel. 11 frigging years! My God! How could a country that says it is the center and the beacon of freedom and democracy have created such an abominable, unjust, immoral institution as Guantanamo, as Bagram, and as this whole system of black sites, rendition, and indefinite detention? We just started at one institution, the Supreme Court. Everybody knows the Supreme Court at various times made rulings that gave some hope, but they've also slammed the door shut. We walked by the district court, which has done more than any institution to keep these men locked up forever, including the men at Bagram. We walked by the FBI, responsible in many ways for the whole system, and here we are in front of the White House. I was one among you who looked at Obama coming in, and I didn't believe the hype and I didn't believe the promise, and I'm not glad to say that. I don't believe that someone who signed up to be commander-in-chief of this empire right now really deeply intended to stop the injustice. At any rate, I will accept what many of you have told me, that if we only raise our voices loud enough, we can force him into a situation and Congress to close this. Well, I feel as many of you do too right now. Last year we had 1,000. This year we had hundreds. I am never one to get down on protest, because I know if we're out here, we at least are not being changed. We are not accommodating and accepting this gross injustice. I was just asked by a reporter, what's the next step? I know the only next step is to go out to all the people we know and have honest conversations with them about what the heck is happening to this country. The underlying illegitimate war on terror that is not over, that is being carried out in the form of targeted assassinations, signature strikes, and kill lists by this commander-in-chief, all of the whole package must be challenged by people like us. Yes, the Guantanamo attorneys, all the other attorneys who care about justice, all the religious folks that we'll be with in a little while, all the former prisoners. And there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of former prisoners in this country, the biggest prison house of nations. I want to invite anyone, when this event ends, to come with me, Andy Worthington, whoever else wants to get together, and let's talk seriously about next steps. How are we going to make this a huge question? How are we going to go into the minds of people in this country and counter the lies and the justification of torture in 0 dark 30? That's a tremendous challenge on us. And I will close by saying that for the last year I've been involved in another political battle up in New York against stop and frisk, the illegitimate NYPD policy of stopping Black and Latino men. 89% of them are Black and Latino. 700,000 people stopped. We've been fighting this with mass civil disobedience protest. We've been in court around it. And there are people who are fighting this who didn't know about Guantanamo. So when I told them that we were coming here to protest, they said, oh, That's mass incarceration by the U.S. government. We're against that too. So I feel hope that those millions of people in this country who know about the 2.4 million people locked up in this country, most because they're poor, are a base of operations, a base of support for closing Guantanamo. And I want to talk to you, Deborah at worldcan'twait.net. Thank you.
You know, it's been interesting. If you live here in Washington for the last couple of months, there's been this debate about the fiscal cliff. You know, the folks behind us and down the mall have debated about what to do to try to close the fiscal deficit. A good place to start is the $139 million a year that's wasted on Guantanamo Bay. If you look at the figures, I mean, you always hear about the fiscal conservatives and cutting out government waste. And we used to have the Golden Fleece Award that William Proxmire gave for wasteful government spending. Well, certainly a likely candidate is the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay. There are 166 men there at a cost of $139 million a year. Half of them we don't want. They're people that we said we want to transfer out. If you do the math, we're spending about $850,000 per man per year to keep them at Guantanamo. So just from a practical perspective, federal prison here costs $30,000 a year. So we're paying 28 times more to keep people at Guantanamo than if we closed it. We can also help close not just our fiscal deficit, but our moral and legal deficit too. You know, for 200 years, what made us unique, and when we talk about American exceptionalism, it was our belief in the law. And then after 9/11, we turned our back on the law, and we chose Guantanamo because we thought it was outside the reach of the law. We got to turn back to our strength. Do you recall in 2009, President Obama gave a talk at the National Archives, not far from here? And when he did, he said all the right words. He said, all too often, talking about the Bush policies, all too often our government made decisions based on fear rather than foresight. All too often our government trimmed the facts and the evidence to fit ideological predispositions. Instead of strategically applying our power and our principles, too often we set those principles aside as luxuries that we could no longer afford. And during this season of fear, too many of us, Democrats, Republicans, politicians, journalists, and citizens, fell silent. In other words, we went off course. That was in 2009. It's 2013, and Guantanamo is still open. Too many people have fallen silent. We expected leadership when President Obama took office, not a spine like Gumby that we've seen on him standing up to torture in Guantanamo and restoring our reputation. So I'm encouraged that you're out here on another cold, dreary January the 11th. I hope it's not necessary to come back next year, that President Obama in the second term will keep the promise he made in 2008. And we're also excited to see the Bush era end and President Obama take office. I'd like to ask you to do one more thing. You know, there's an international symbol of distress. And if you turn the flag upside down, I always wear a, I served in the Air Force for 25 years because I believe in our country and the Constitution and the principles that it was founded on. And I believe in our flag. A symbol of distress is turning the flag upside down. I'd ask you to join me on January 25th when I turn mine upside down as a symbol that our country is in distress. Because that's the day that John Kiriakou goes to prison for talking about torture, while not a single person has ever been prosecuted for engaging in torture. And what does that say about our country when your words get you sent to prison, but engaging in torture, you're treated as a hero? So to me, that's a country in distress. So on January 25th, it's time to fly the flag upside down and let people know that those aren't American values when you try to shut up people for talking and you let torturers walk.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I have to be honest. It's hard sometimes to look past how depressing this is. It's 2013 and we're still here. But every year when I come here, it inspires me seeing all the different people that have come out. And it doesn't matter how large the crowd is or how small it is, it always reinvigorates me. So because it's the anniversary, I thought we'd reflect on the past, the present, and the future, both the bleak but the bright as well. You know, when it comes to the past, it's been long enough that I don't need to dwell on the realities that you're all familiar with, some of you more intimately than others. The torture, the sleep deprivation, the waterboarding, the imprisonment without charge, the men like Adnan Latif and others who have passed away without ever seeing their loved ones, without ever getting their day in court. I think all of us here, unfortunately, are all too familiar with that. But what some of you may be less familiar with is that some men did get out, and they did manage to rebuild their lives, and they are thriving. Men like my client Ammar Amir, who's now in Algeria, back with his family, and even the men at Guantanamo, who managed to retain their humanity and to survive despite everything that they've been put through. And let's look at the present. We're also all unfortunately familiar with the fact that of the 166 prisoners at Guantanamo, well over a half of them have been approved for release, but they languish. These are men like, the clients that my students at CUNY and I represent, men like Shakir Ahmed, who for the first time, I can say, has been approved for release by the Obama administration. That fact used to be secret, but now we can speak about it for the first time. Men like our client Abdul Hadi Faraj, who's also been released, who doesn't know if his family is still alive in Syria, but he cannot get out either. So that's what's bleak about today. But what's also heartening is that as we stand here today, our clients at Guantanamo, as they did last year and as they did every year on this date, are marking this occasion, this anniversary, the sad anniversary, with a protest of their own at Guantanamo. And every time I tell them that we assembled here, we gathered in Washington, it inspires them. It's important for them to be doing it on the same day as all of us. So we have to keep that in mind as well. Now, looking ahead to the future, I think we all know what's coming up. They're going to tell us that it's impossible to close Guantanamo because of Congress, because of national security. They're going to tell us that they need to continue spying on us and they need to maintain these sprawling surveillance programs. They're going to tell us that Bagram is necessary, that executions by drones are necessary. We know all of that's coming. They're going to keep on doing that. So I think for all of us here, it's important to remember that the key to everything, the key to ending Bagram, Guantanamo, the key to ending the imprisonment of Muslim men here in the United States as a result of predatory prosecutions, all of that is in that house. All of that is with the man who lives there. And they're going to tell us that it's Congress's fault, that it's the fault of the courts. But in the end, it's a matter of political will. And we have to remember that. And we have to remind the man who sits in that house that it is a matter of political will and that we expect him to make good, not only on the promises that he's made, but to make additional promises and deliver on those as well. So I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things. I think one is to keep on doing what you have been doing year in and year out. And the other thing is, for the year ahead, have at least 10 conversations, talk to 10 different people who may not be as knowledgeable as you are about these issues, and inform them. Inform them about Guantanamo, inform them about Bagram, inform them about torture. Because it's only in doing that that we can hopefully get the message back to the man who sits in that house that he needs to deliver on his promises and make good on all the other things that we expect the world over. Thank you.
Thank you again for being here. I want you to hear each other's voice right now so we can close by hearing the power within us, right? The light within us that makes us want to stand up for people that we know are our family. So hear each other's voice. When I say one, you say family. One. Family. One. Family. When I say we are, y'all say together. We are. Together. We are. Together. Thank you so much for being here. Peace. Thank you.